I am the type of model builder that likes to paint the model as it's being built. I find it easier to do it that way. Once the model is assembled, it's more difficult to get the paint into all the right places and to get clean lines. When it comes to the hull, I like to paint the hull quite early on in the build for a couple of reasons. The first reason is to get a feel for painting the camouflage pattern. Different camouflage patterns have different characteristics, which results in different complexities when you're trying to paint them. That may require that the technique that I'm using be adapted to suit the particular camouflage pattern, but in general, I just want to know what issues there could be when I'm painting the camouflage pattern so that I can address them now and prepare for them when I'm painting other parts of the ship. The second reason is that it's also a good time to experiment with the painting. Later on, once the ship is nearly complete with all its delicate details and painting nearly complete, making changes is going to be very difficult. That also applies to weathering. The type of weathering that I'm going to do in this model, I want to experiment with now so that I can follow that through and prepare for it for later stages of the construction and painting of this model. The bottom line is that at this part of the build, with just the hull complete, if I don't like the paint job, I can strip off the paint and do it again, and that won't bother me too much. So, to that end, I'm going to do some experimentation. The first layer of paint that I'm applying is red-brown. This is going to be an undercoat. I'm going to completely cover it with future layers of paint. I'm going to try and use this layer to create rust effects by using fine sandpaper to sand through the upper layers of paint and then expose this underneath. I don't know if this is going to work, but if it doesn't work, it's easy enough to just spray over it with the appropriate color coat and the effect will then disappear. After letting the red-brown paint dry, and proceed to paint the camouflage in the colors as indicated by the Trumpeter painting guide. The first color that I'm applying is the lightest color for the freeboard. This is Mr. Color 308, and it's just a light gray. Even though this light gray paint is only intended for the freeboard, I haven't bothered with masking off the waterline. That's because the waterline is going to be easily located by the line that I had scribed into the hull, so there's no need for me to do that at this stage. And as the lighter color, subsequent darker colors will easily cover it in the future. After the light gray paint, the next thing that I'm going to do is some pre-shading. This is also a bit of an experiment for me. I've never done pre-shading before, so I want to give it a go and see how it behaves. To do the pre-shading, I'm using black paint. This is Tamiya XF1, and I'm just following along the scribed lines to help give them a bit of definition. The intention here is that the pre-shading will help break up the light gray paint, give it a bit more texture instead of it being a solid, monotonous tone. I am also applying the pre-shading to the lower hull. This is a bit pointless because it is going to be covered by hull red, which I suspect will completely obliterate this, but I'm just using it for practice. If it's not seen, it doesn't matter. I can always apply another layer if that's what's required. After pre-shading the entire hull, I spray the hull with another layer of the light grey. The intention here is to just tone down that black paint so it just becomes something that can be faintly seen through this top layer of light grey. The problem is that I don't know how far to take this. I think if I don't do enough of it, it'll look really strange and ugly with strong black lines showing through. But if I do it too much and make these lines too faint, when I do future layers of weathering, it's going to all but disappear. Anyway, this is just an experiment, so if this pre-shading doesn't amount to anything, it's fine. While the latest layer of light grey paint is drying on the model, I move on to preparing the mask for the navy blue. This is the most time-consuming part of painting the hull. The first thing that I did was to scan the painting guide and then enlarge it such that the painting guide is the same size as the model. After printing out the enlarged painting guide, I placed clear box tape over it to provide a smooth surface onto which I can place masking tape and remove it easily. After placing the masking tape on the painting guide, I use a fine liner to trace out the camouflage pattern. Once the camouflage pattern has been traced out, the masking tape is removed from the painting guide and cut into sections, which are stuck to a cutting mat. Once all the sections for one side of the ship have been cut apart and stuck to the cutting mat, I use a hobby knife to precisely cut out the pattern. While I'm cutting out the masks, let's talk a little bit about this camouflage pattern. This is measure 12, and the guide for measure 12 that was sent to the captains was basically just paint splotches in these colors on your ship. It didn't really define the sizes or the shapes of them. The result of this was that each ship with measure 12 camouflage had a unique pattern that was left largely up to the captain to decide on. When it comes to the USS Alabama, I had a bit of trouble finding a good reference for its camouflage pattern. In photos of the ship, you see its camouflage pattern slightly changing over time, and in the drawings that you find online, they're all slightly different. So to me, that gives me license to kind of choose one and try to replicate it, but if I don't get it perfectly right, I think that's okay. This is another case where I'm trying to go for a reasonable representation of the camouflage pattern, not 100% historical accuracy. That covers the general sort of pattern that I'm going to use, but there are some small details that also need to be considered. If you look closely at the Trumpeter painting guide, you can see the pattern has a little bit of a soft edge to it, but if you look at photos, it does appear to have a hard edge with some areas faded a little bit, creating a softer effect. So for my model, I'll go with the hard edge, and in some areas try to introduce a soft edge and create some fading. For the soft edges, maybe I'll get lucky and there'll be a little bit of underspray under the masking tape, and I'll create an accidental soft edge that I'll end up keeping, but you'll just have to see how the airbrushing goes. For now, all that I'm trying to do is cut out all of these masks to mask off the light gray areas so that I can apply them to the model and then spray the entire model with the navy blue. After cutting out all of the masks, the port side of the ship, then proceed to place them on the hull. Here I am being careful to place them in the correct location. If you look carefully at the painting guide, you can see certain features on the hull which help you align the masks on the actual model. In some cases, I don't get the mask in the correct position the first time around, so I have to lift it and reposition it until I'm happy with how everything is aligning. It can also be quite useful to just do a rough positioning of the mask across the entire hull, and then once you see everything in relation to each other, you can reposition things to get them into a better fit. For the most part, this isn't very difficult to do. Some of the larger masks are a bit frustrating because they have a tendency to roll back on themselves and then stick to themselves. The only other minor complication when applying these masks has to do with this notch in the hull. Here, once the mask has been correctly positioned on the hull, I use a hobby knife to cut the mask to allow me to push it into the recess. The gap that is then opened up in the masking tape will then be covered later on with more masking tape. After the port side is masked, the entire process is then repeated on the starboard side. The mask is removed from the painting guide in sections, the sections are stuck to the cutting mat, a pattern is then cut out with a hobby knife, and the cut out mask is then applied to the starboard side of the hull. After applying all the masking tape and covering the gaps with extra pieces of masking tape, I moved on to spraying the area with a matte varnish. The intention of this layer of matte varnish is to help control the underspray by closing the gap between the edge of the masking tape and the hull. But instead, I got my first surprise from the pre-shading. This matte varnish is very thin. This is quite a harsh matte varnish, which if you put on too thick creates a very rough effect, so that's why I had heavily thinned it. But it seems that all that solvent has also dissolved that top layer of light grey, allowing the pre-shading black to come through a little bit more strongly. This is a little bit concerning, although not for now, because what you see here will be sprayed over with navy blue and be concealed, but rather for the light grey that is under the masking tape. Although I won't be spraying this matte varnish on those areas, so as it stands they are fine, in the future I will spray them with gloss varnish to prepare the model for weathering, and I am wondering if the same effect will occur then. But that is just something that we're going to have to wait and see if it occurs. This is yet another reason why I like to start painting early, because all little niggles like this can be worked out and I can get solutions to them before it becomes a problem later on in the build. Anyway, after spraying the hull with the light coat of matte varnish, I then sprayed with Mr. Color number 14. This is navy blue. Once the navy blue paint has dried, it's then time for the best part, removing the masking tape and revealing the pattern. As I'm removing the masking tape, I can say that I'm quite happy with what I'm seeing. Generally, the line appears to be quite crisp and the mask has done its job. There are defects all over the place that can be corrected, that can be done later. There are always problems that need to be corrected, so that doesn't really concern me. But the general shape and look of the camouflage pattern does look good to me. And in some areas there is a little bit of underspray that has created that soft edge effect, which I do quite like. At this point, it's really a matter of deciding which defects I like enough to keep and which ones I'm going to correct. That, though, I'm going to do in a different video. For now, I'm just going to finish painting the hull with its first pass of the camouflage and anti-fouling. On the starboard side of the ship, the effect is pretty much the same, although there is some damage to the underlying paint and some of it has been removed with the masking tape. Although I am in two minds about this. In one end, yes, it's a defect that you don't really want to see, but on the other hand, it has created a sort of chipping effect and it is revealing that red-brown paint that I applied at the very beginning, which I kind of like. So I am not yet sure if I'm going to keep it. Obviously, the defects that are lower down below the waterline are going to be covered by the hull red, so those ones will go. But the upper little defects around the mask, those ones might actually stay. I have to think about that. With all of the masking for the camouflage pattern now removed, I can move on to the next round of masking. That is to mask off the waterline and to paint the lower hull in hull red. Normally, masking the waterline can be a bit tricky to mask because the hull is curved, and as the hull curves, you need to curve the masking tape to make it stay with an apparent straight line. But in this case, because I had previously scribed in the waterline on the joint between the lower red hull and the upper light grey hull plastic, it's actually quite easy to follow and get right. To mask the waterline, I always start with a fairly thin variety of masking tape. This is 3mm masking tape to get the edge because it's just easier to slightly curve. And once I have the waterline itself masked, I use a thicker masking tape just to cover the upper hull, which I don't want to have oversprayed with the hull red paint. Once the freeboard is all safely masked off, I do another round of the matte varnish just to once again seal the masking tape, and then spray the entire lower hull with hull red. This is Mr. Color number 29. The model is yet again set aside to dry for a little while before applying yet more masking tape to mask off the bottom of the boot topping. This is the black line between the camouflage pattern on the freeboard and the anti-fouling on the lower hull. To help ensure that I have a consistent width for the boot top across the entire length of the hull, I'm using 2mm tape to mark its width. I'm placing this masking tape directly below the masking tape covering the freeboard. After the 2mm tape, I place 3mm tape directly below the 2mm tape, which, if you recall back to when I was scribing the panel lines into the hull, aligns not only precisely with the bottom of the 2mm tape, but also the top of the line for the first rung of paneling below the waterline. That gives me a very precise guide to follow for the width of the boot top across the entire length of the hull. The only place that it gets a little bit tricky is at the stern, where I'm unable to follow lines around those tight curves, so I have to estimate it with flexible masking tape and a little bit of trial and error, but eventually I get it into a state that I'm happy with. After which, the boot top is sprayed with Tamiya XF1 black. After the short amount of time that it takes me to clean the airbrush, the black paint on the boot top has sufficiently dried for the masking tape to be removed. First, I remove the masking tape from the lower hull, then the freeboard, revealing the paintwork that you have seen before. All that is left now are the two 3mm strips of masking tape above and below the boot top. Let's remove them and see if I got this boot top right. Looks good to me. This is quite a striking camouflage pattern. I think it's going to look really good on the whole ship. This is where I'm going to end the video. There are corrections that need to be done to the paintwork, and there are weathering effects that I need to experiment with as well. I want to try and sand through some of these layers of paint to reveal the red-brown below. I also need to see what happens if I apply gloss varnish to the light grey. Will the pre-shading come through too strong? And then there are other weathering effects that I want to try at this stage before I finalize on exactly how I'm going to paint this model. All of that I'm going to do in the next video. If you don't want to wait for the scheduled release of videos and want to watch them when they are uploaded, consider becoming a channel member by clicking the join button below. If you would like to support the channel, like and subscribe, and as always, questions are welcome in the comments. Thank you for watching. Cheers.